moving on, let's talk about Haiti and the unrest that's been happening there, largely over. Well, it's multifactored here. These protests, I think there's a good argument to make that Haiti's been sort of under perpetual protests and unrest for 3 years, since 2018 or so. I forget when the protests really kicked off in 2018, but around that time. And since then, it's been due to a variety of reasons: oil prices, lack of labor protections, all the way to what's happening now with the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, refusing to step down from office. And there's now a debate on whether or not he should step down, I guess, depending who you look at and what news source you look into. There's been claims of attempted coups against him. A lot of conflicting stories, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but it's hard to get a real, a complete understanding of not only what's happening on the ground. I think what's happening on the ground is understandable, but the paths on where this can lead, I think, is a little bit unknown at this point. I don't know where Haiti's going to go in terms of the unrest. I'm going to play a clip from Al Jazeera briefly talking about what's happening there and why you should pay attention to it.
Clashes between the opposition and security forces right next to the presidential palace. It's become a regular occurrence on the streets of Port-au-Prince. Protesters continue to demand President Jovenel Moïse steps down.
It's a strike against kidnapping, against hunger in the country, and we are sending a clear message to the president to respect the Constitution.
Earlier this week, transport unions and other workers went on a 2-day strike denouncing institutional violence and an alarming rise in kidnappings. Human rights groups say at least 1,000 people were kidnapped in 2020.
When someone is kidnapped, the person must go to the street and ask for Jovenel Moïse to give him security. That's the reason why we organized 2 days of lockout to show Jovenel Moïse that we can't accept this situation, But as soon as the lockout finished, the kidnapping restart quickly.
Haiti's opposition says it's time for Moïse to go. They say his mandate ends this Sunday. But Moïse disagrees. He says his 5-year term began when he was sworn in 2017, and that he still has 1 year in power. But members of the opposition say Moïse's term began in 2016 in the wake of chaotic elections. And while the political crisis deepens, Haiti's economy continues to deteriorate. Economists like Camille Charlemagne says urgent action is needed.
The amount of people going hungry in the country has doubled. It's gone from 2 million to 4 million people. The currency is devaluated, and there's an inflation rate close to 25%.
To complicate matters, legislative elections were postponed when parliamentary terms expired. This past year, President Moïse has been ruling Haiti by decree. The U.S. and the Organization of American States have urged new legislative elections to restore the balance of power. Moïse is proposing a referendum in April to reform the constitution.
Last week, we held a major meeting with all entities, including the UN, the Provisional Electoral Council, the Advisory Committee, the government, the police chief, the Prime Minister. We had a big talk about security issues, elections, and the referendum. We were clear with all these people on April 25th because it will be a victory date for us.
But the opposition says it's another excuse to hold on to power. And that's why they vow to continue pressuring the government on the streets. Teresa Bo, Al Jazeera.
Haiti's been rocked with, austerity measures and neoliberal policies for a long time now, and has obviously been a victim of neocolonial economic exploitation for some time, both from the U.S. and European powers. So it's really saddening because Haiti, from a historical perspective, I did a whole basic documentary on the Haitian Revolution, so I really am fascinated, I guess is the right term, about Haitian history and obviously the revolutionary history, radical movements within Haiti. And it's clear that the amount of turmoil, the amount of class antagonism within Haiti will eventually bring about another revolution. Whether it's from the military, whether it's from the people, these are concerns I have. Because when you have the U.S., I believe Biden has come out and sort of condemned Moise a little bit, but when you have like the OAS, which was obviously involved with the Bolivian coup, which ousted Evo Morales in 2019. If they're talking about, in a sense, implicitly that this leader needs to go, then they've already looking for who can be the replacement to him, what sort of organizational or structural form they can replace it with, and what austerity measures they can further place within Haiti. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the IMF and World Bank involved in this situation more and more. Like, Haiti has been a place of exploitation and oppression for Black and brown people for hundreds of years. And it doesn't seem like that's changing. And hopefully the people rise up. Like, that's just the God honest truth. Like, there's no other way to look at it. Like, honestly, like when I see headlines like this, I think it's awesome. Down with the dictatorship. I love that. I am deeply concerned though about a ruling class counter-revolutionary movement that co-ops these protests that happen so often due to U.S. and European meddling. That's just the reality to it. So pay attention to Haiti. I think it's important. I think it's going to be important. It's been important for years, and obviously from a historical perspective, has been a center of history in many aspects. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens there.